So guys, what's going on? I hope you guys are well. I hope you guys are staying safe. So guys, I want to talk about Gennady Golovkin. Gennady Golovkin is 39 years of age. Everybody seems to be writing him off. Everybody seems to think he's past his best. I want to see 3 fights that I've always been intrigued in the middleweight division. You know 2 of them, but one of them is going to be a wild card. And you're going to say, what's the wild card? Who's the wild card? 2 of them are Andrade and Charlo. And we're going to talk about that. The wild card. Who's the wild card? Who does Imran want to see in with Gennady Golovkin? That's a wild card. Well, you've seen him recently, and he was involved in a big fight. Came up short. I think you know who I'm talking about. Yes, Mr. Billy Joe Saunders. I want to see Billy against Golovkin. I don't know what Billy's injury situation is. Some of the fans seem to think that Billy's career's over and he's going to retire, he ain't going to fight. But I don't know. I think there's still fire left in Billy Joe Saunders. And he didn't do too bad. Like, I thought he was losing the fight against Canelo, but I don't think he did. He didn't disgrace himself. He did well. You know, he was competitive in the fight. And I want to see him fight Golovkin. I always wanted to see him fight Golovkin. I want to see Golovkin in his prime was a serious pressure fighter. And I wanted to see how Billy Joe Saunders would adapt in a fight where somebody's pressuring him. Somebody has no respect for his power and he's just walking him down. How would Billy Joe react to that? Golovkin now at 39 is a lot slower. So, for me personally, I would love to see Golovkin fight Billy Joe. By the way, I think Golovkin would beat Andrade, Charlo, and Billy Joe. Even now. I'll explain why in all 3. I can explain Andrade and Billy Joe in one thing. Like, Andrade and Billy Joe are technically very good, are very sound, slick, good feet. They move around the ring very well. They're fast. They're hard to hit. They're not easy to hit. They're slick. The problem is Golovkin's a very good boxer. And he cuts off the ring very well. And even at 39, I've seen him, he's not what he was, but he's still good enough to cut off the ring and good enough to, give you a very, very hard, rough night's work. Golovkin still could cut off the ring, and Golovkin would have no respect for their power because Andrade and Billy Joe aren't big punchers at middleweight. I do think Billy Joe's best chance of doing something is at middleweight. I don't think he's a super middleweight. I don't think Billy Joe's a fully fledged 168. I don't think he's got the power to really hurt anyone at that weight. And I just think that, someone like Canelo showed that he'd take his punches and just walk forward and land his shots. I think Billy Joe's best suited weight is at 160. I think a fight with him and Gennady Golovkin would be difficult for Billy Joe because of the pressure and the fact that Billy doesn't really have any power to keep Golovkin off. And I think the fight may play out the same way as the Canelo fight, actually. I think it would have been the same in his prime and now. Like, it would have been the same in Golovkin's prime. In Golovkin's prime, it may have been worse. See, a lot of people got carried away with Billy Joe Saunders' performance against Lemieux. And don't get me wrong, his performance against Lemieux was very good. But Lemieux doesn't have the boxing ability of Canelo or Golovkin. And I always said this. I said this before. I'm not just saying this in hindsight now that we lost to Canelo. I said this prior to the Canelo fight. And all of you guys that were following my channel know this. That Golovkin and Canelo are very good boxers. They cut off the ring very well. And they're not going to have any respect for his power. And Billy Joe's not going to be able to keep them off. See, you may be able to win a couple of rounds, but it's a matter of time before those guys get to you and start, hitting you with big shots. And when they're hitting you consistently with big shots, it's going to wear you down. It's going to wear you down, and where you are, you eventually will be stopped. Eventually they'll stop you, they'll get to you. Because Billy Joe isn't this slick guy that people make out like you can't touch him. Like if he was a guy like Pernell Whitaker, for example, where you just can't land on him, he's just so slick. And the thing is with Pernell Whitaker, he controls the pace. The problem is when you're in with Canelo and Golovkin, you're not controlling the pace because you have no power and you can't push them back, right? They're controlling the pace because they're walking forward. So you're mentally and physically getting drained in the fight. And that's the problem that Billy Joe had against Canelo. He just couldn't keep him off, and Canelo kept coming. Golovkin's even worse because Golovkin's even more aggressive than Canelo. Canelo at times boxes, he sits in the center of the ring and boxes. He can walk you down as well, and he can get aggressive. But Golovkin, he's in fifth gear right away. He's not messing around. He's not standing with you in box, especially if he doesn't respect your power. Especially if he doesn't respect your power and he feels like, look what he did with Kell Brook. He almost run him over because he didn't respect his power. So he just in the first round, Kell Brook could have been knocked out in that fight. In the first round, Kell Brook was wobbled with a left hook and he was almost taken out in the first round in that fight against Golovkin. Because Golovkin, he just starts at 100 miles an hour. He just walks at you. He wants to get aggressive. He wants you to feel his presence right away. And that's why I believe he'll get to Charlo and Charlo and Billy Joe. Billy Joe and Andrade. And I personally think that with Charlo it'd be a harder fight because Charlo's a more physical fighter. But I think after watching him against Montiel, I think Golovkin's more physical. He's stronger. He punches harder, and I actually think Golovkin's got a better chin. So to be honest with you, I think if you trade with Golovkin, I think you're going to come out second best. I just don't think anyone can beat him at that kind of game. So personally, I think no matter who it is, whether it's Billy Joe, whether it's Charlo, I still think, and this is why I make these videos, because I still think Golovkin becomes undisputed champion. I still believe Golovkin would become undisputed champion. I do. Golovkin, for me, can still become undisputed middleweight champion. I do. I believe that. I believe Golovkin beats Jermall Charlo and Demetrius Andrade and can become undisputed. In my opinion, in my humble opinion, that's why I think Golovkin should go for it and look to create his legacy, because that would put Golovkin, Golovkin's already in the Hall of Fame for what he did in terms of the knockouts and defenses he had, and he's created history. He's a great fighter, no doubt about it. Gennady Golovkin is a great fighter. I just think his resume early on was so... I would say it was a little bit like Crawford's, where there wasn't a lot of names on there. When you think about it, who did he really fight? You know, when you think about his resume, Jacobs, Canelo, apart from that, who's he really fought? When you think about... Go through Golovkin's resume, and I'm not disrespecting any of the names that, he's fought. He's fought guys like, from the UK, like Matthew Macklin and stuff. Martin Murray, who's a good fighter. But the fact of the matter is, he hasn't really got a lot of great names on there. Guys that you can say, wow, that pop out at you. Like Jacobs is one. Canelo is one. And that's it, really. Who else is there? There isn't a lot of names on his resume that really pop out at you. That you think David Lemieux, but again, we see how people look at David Lemieux. So you would even go as far as saying that he hasn't even got, if he had beat Billy Joe, for example, where would that rank? You'd say maybe after Danny Jacobs, and the Jacobs fight was, see, that's another thing. The Jacobs fight, which is his biggest win in his career, because he didn't beat Canelo, although I think he won the first fight. Technically on paper he hasn't won, so his biggest win is Danny Jacobs. That's his biggest win. Apart from that, what other real, if you were to say name 5 elite Golovkin wins, it was his second best win, David Lemieux. This is what I'm saying. And this is why I said history won't be kind to Golovkin. Because I feel like Golovkin was a lot better than what his resume suggests. And I personally think he deserved to get that Canelo fight. The first one, he deserved to win it. But, you know, he didn't. He didn't get the decision. So Golovkin, when you look back at it, people could say, well, who did he really fight? You know, his resume is weak. Even though we all know how great Golovkin was, and we know if those guys did step in the ring with him, they would have lost. Most of them. Even the names like Billy Joe, Billy Joe would get beaten, you know, against Golovkin in his prime. But Golovkin, unfortunately, because of the lack of depth in that division, but this is why a lot of people criticize Golovkin, because they feel Golovkin could have moved up weight, and he didn't. And this is where the criticism comes in, because Golovkin could have fought your Andre Wards. Golovkin could have fought your, you know, Kovalevs. You know, he could have gone up and fought like I think with the Froch fight, I think he wanted the Froch fight. He fancied that fight. But I just think that I don't know whether Froch wanted it, if I'm honest with you. I feel like Golovkin could have done a lot more, and I think he could have dominated at 168. When Andre Ward moved up, I think that was the time for Golovkin to move up, because I think he would have beaten everybody at 168. But the problem is with Golovkin, he didn't take that risk. And Canelo did it. If Canelo could do it, Golovkin could have done it. You know, because Golovkin, although people say, oh, well, he hasn't got a really great defense. Golovkin, he would, for me, he was a woke, like, elite boxer. He was a very good boxer. He didn't have to show it because he was so powerful and he was battering guys. But Golovkin was he was an elite boxer. Not just a power puncher, he could box. And I don't think he really gets credit for that, the way he used to cut off the ring. See, at super middleweight, people seem to think that the guys were bigger, they were stronger, they would have been able to absorb his shots better, they would have been able to hurt him and back him up. I still don't see which guys in the super middleweight division at that time would have been able to do that. I don't. And when I look at someone like Froch, for example, I've seen a lot of Froch fights. I just don't think he beats Gennady Golovkin. And that was probably at that time the second best guy after Andre Ward. Andre Ward had moved up. And I just think Golovkin would have beaten them all. So I do think that was a trick miss by Golovkin, because I think Golovkin could have probably dominated at 168. But at 160 right now, I personally think Golovkin can still become undisputed. Golovkin can still become undisputed. He can. I believe he can. I believe he can beat Andrade and Charlo and become undisputed. A lot of people seem to think he's ducking Andrade and Charlo. Let's see. Let's see, because I personally think I would still fancy him to beat those guys, even at this age, even the fact that he's not a spring chicken. I still think he can beat them. I'm being serious. I think Gennady Golovkin's the real deal. That's just my opinion, and some of you may disagree. But that's just my opinion. But leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'd love to know your opinion about this. Leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think, guys. And guys, remember to please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.